Hello everyone and welcome back to While You Were Cleaning. Today I have some Dollar Tree fall wreath DIYs to share with you, and every time I put together one of these wreaths using Dollar Tree floral, I am surprised all over again at how good you can make Dollar Tree floral look. So I hope that you enjoy today's video and that you enjoy putting together your own fall wreaths. If you do enjoy this video, please hit that like button, please comment and subscribe, and we'll go ahead and start creating. For this wreath DIY, I'll be using one of these 14-inch wreath forms. And what I'm going to do on this is I'm going to use my wire cutters to remove that inner ring. I've noticed that these wreath forms are kind of wide and it's really hard to get that wire to cover up completely while you're adding your floral. So I just went ahead and took that off. Next, I wanted to show you through the different florals that I'm going to be using, and this finished wreath is going to be cream with some of this mauve color and burgundy colors as well. That was the main color scheme that I was going for here, and I found that the more variety of florals that you use on a wreath or in an arrangement, the better it's going to turn out looking. I love to add a lot of different types of floral when I put together my wreaths. So to start off, I always go through and I just clip off all of my flowers from the main stems. That way, once I'm ready to start adding them to the wreath, I can just go ahead and start wiring them in place without having to cut the flowers as I go. I also pre-cut some green floral wire pieces in 2 and 3 inch pieces so that they were ready for me to use to add the flowers to the wreath. And then I grouped my flowers together in 3 or 4 different stem pieces and wired those down together. So much simpler than trying to wire down each individual flower. You fill up your wreath a lot faster and it's a lot less work with twisting wires together. And then I went back through and I added in some of these pink flowers. As I was finishing up the first half of the wreath, I just thought that it needed a little bit more of that color, needed to be a little bit fuller. To put together a wreath with the same floral that I used, you are going to want 2 or 3 bushes of each of these different types of flowers. So I did go ahead and I cut 1 of each when I was first starting out, and then I did have some extras already. So as I was working my way through the wreath, I realized I am going to need more flowers. So I did use, I think, 3 of those mauve peony flowers, and then I used 2 of each of the different accent flowers, like the dahlias and the daisies, the hop bush, and then that willow branch piece, along with those cattail pieces. When you get to the end of the wreath where you're adding flowers on, you'll just want to lift up your flowers on the one side and wire your new flowers on underneath them. That way all of your stems are covered. You don't want those stems sticking out at the end. So this is the easiest way to do that. Just lift up those flowers and then you can adjust them individually. Next, I'm going to be adding some of these pumpkins. I got these bigger clip pumpkins, and then these smaller ones are newer this year. And I went ahead and added all 7 of these pumpkins to my wreath. So the clip ones and the wire ones really are both very simple to add on. You can just clip them on to a stem or a flower, anywhere that you think looks good on the wreath. I did put the 3 larger pumpkins kind of spread out from each other, and then put the smaller pumpkins in between them, and I am going to be adding a bow to this wreath. So the bow is going to be in between these last 2 small pumpkins that I added. I'm going to be using this burgundy buffalo check wired ribbon from Dollar Tree. I really love this pattern that they had out with the fall items this year. So when I make ribbons, I do this figure 8 pattern. You might have to watch back at it a few times, but I did do the figure 8 pattern 3 times, so it has 6 total loops, and then I left some tails sticking out on the end so that it had some parts where the ribbon would be hanging down. And then once I wire them together in the center, what I do is I go through each loop and I twist that second half so that it's straight, so it no longer has that spiral to it. It's not in that figure 8 pattern anymore. I hope that makes sense. It's always hard for me to explain how to do ribbons, but the reason that I do this figure 8 pattern is so that the finished side of the ribbon is always facing out on my bows, and so hopefully watching it, you might have to watch it a few times, but hopefully watching it will make sense to you. And then I always add my bows to whichever part of my wreath I feel like looks the worst. So bows are great for covering up those parts. And here's how that finished wreath turned out. I really love the uniqueness of the colors for this wreath. These are the colors that I'm really drawn to this year, with the burgundies and the pinks and the cream colors. They're what I'm mainly going to be using in my fall decor, so I wanted to try out a wreath in these colors. For my second wreath DIY today, you will need 2 packs of these table tennis or ping pong balls from Dollar Tree. They come 6 to a pack, so you'll need a total of 12 of them. And then what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to turn them into beads. So I'm going to use my drill bit to add a hole from one side straight through to the other side, and I am doing these holes right along where the seam is on the ball because I don't really want that seam to be shown in our finished project. So just make sure you drill right along the seam, and then I'm going to string all of these beads onto a wire piece so that I can spray paint them. And right now I'm only showing you 6 because I was starting out this project with just 6 and then I decided that I needed 12 instead. So make sure that you do spray paint 12 of these. I'm going to be using this Rust-Oleum Satin Dark Walnut spray paint color. This is just a really deep brown color. It's almost black. And you can just give these one really good coat. I like having them on this wire piece because I can just coat every side of them at once, and then I just hung up the wire piece. Next, you'll need another 14-inch wreath form, and we're going to be cutting some wires off of this wreath form for just half of the wreath. So you want to cut the wires off the half of the wreath that does not have these seams that I'm showing you here. Those seams could break apart under pressure, so you don't want them on a single wire by themselves, and you'll understand it as we start to cut this. So we are going to be doing the opposite side of the wreath that has those seams on it. And what you're going to do is just cut out the 2 inner wire pieces and then cut them away from the outside and the inside wire pieces, and you'll see it'll leave these little metal tabs, and you just want to take your pliers and just wiggle those until they come off. Some of them are easier to get off than other ones, but they do come off. Just make sure you leave those little wires long enough to grab a hold of with your pliers. And then I went ahead and did 1 coat of that dark walnut spray paint on just the half of the wreath where the 2 wires are left. On my wreath now, the light side of the wreath is going to be the side that I'm going to add floral to. The dark side is the side that is going to be showing and that we are going to add those beads to. If you want your floral to be the opposite of what I'm going to do today, and you want it to be on the right side of your wreath, you're going to want to cut that outer ring at the bottom on the left side. But since I'm going to put my floral on the left half of my wreath, I'm going to cut that outer ring at the bottom right edge. Next, I went ahead and strung my 12 beads on the outer ring of this wreath. And you might have some plastic edges that are sticking out from when you drilled the holes through. So you can just take a pair of scissors and just clip those off. They're really simple to get off. And these were pretty simple to string on here as well. Some of them would get stuck a little bit, but they were pretty easy to get all 12 beads onto that outer ring. Next, to secure that outer ring back in place, I just used a small amount of green floral wire, and I twisted onto the main frame and then twisted that around the single wire piece. And then I added a little bit of hot glue right where the two wires come together, just to make sure that it stays in place. And then lastly, with these beads, since they don't fill out the entire outer ring of this wreath, I went ahead and just pushed them all towards the bottom so that they weren't moving. Now I'll go ahead and show you through the different florals that I'm going to be using on this wreath. And I did use, I think, one entire bush of each of these different florals. I think I had a couple extra of those hot bush ones, the stems from those, but otherwise I used a whole bush of each of these. And like I said before, I do like to go through and clip each of these branches off of the main stem. That way they are just ready for me just to start adding right onto the wreath. And just like with the last wreath, I am grouping these floral pieces together in groups of 3 or 4 to add onto the wreath. And I did pre-cut some 2 and 3-inch wire pieces so that they were right on hand, ready for me to wire these flowers to the wreath. Right at the top edge of my wreath here, I wanted to add some of these branches that kind of stuck out a little bit more. So I added some of those willow branches and the cattails right to the top. And then as you're just working your way around this, you want to group some flowers together. I mostly did them kind of randomly. I didn't always do the same flowers grouped together. I went off of which flowers I needed in order to cover up this wire piece. And then I did space out these willows and cattail branches because those seem to kind of stick out a little bit more from the wreath and make it look a little bit more whimsical. I kept adding groups of flowers and branches, working my way around this wreath until I got to the end of the wreath form here. And when you get down to the end here, you'll want to add your branches on, still flowing them in the same direction that you were doing before. But after you wire these on, you'll want to go through with your wire cutters and cut off all of those stems that are sticking out there, because those might show when you're finishing off your wreath. So I don't normally cut off the stems for the other ones, but I did on that portion there. And then when you're ready to add your last groups of flowers on, you are going to stick those in the opposite direction. So if the stems are pointing to the right, going most of your wreath, these last few flowers that you add, you're going to want to stick those stems pointing towards the left. And then wire those down in place, and then I added one last flower there right in the center to cover up where that wire was and where all of the flowers come together right there in the center. And the really nice thing about all of these wired flowers is that you can adjust them so easily just by bending the stems. And here is that finished wreath. I really love this one. This is the first time I've done a wreath that is more of a half wreath on this channel. So I hope that you like the way that this one looks and the combination of colors. You can of course use any combination of colors that you want for either of today's wreaths. I hope that you have enjoyed watching today's wreath DIY video using all Dollar Tree products. Let me know down in the comments which colors you are decorating with for fall this year. I know that these wreaths are a little bit more unique colors, but I hope that you still enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Bye!